They told us the arena was justice. I believed them. For cycles uncounted, I had sat among the elevated tiers of the Imperium's Grand Colosseum, recording the final moments of lesser species. The arena was not merely spectacle, it was doctrine, a demonstration of truth, that strength defines worth and weakness deserves extinction. I had seen creatures of every imaginable form dragged into that sacred pit. Winged titans that darkened the sky, chitinous war beasts bred for conquest, sentient constructs forged in dying stars. All of them entered with defiance. All of them left as silence. The sand below was not sand at all, but powdered bone, bleached by time and soaked in memory. And still they came. The day the human arrived, nothing changed. No shift in the crowd's anticipation, no whispered speculation among the noble houses, no ripple of curiosity across the neural broadcast streams. The guards escorted him like any other condemned organism, bound in gravimetric restraints, flanked by armored sentinels whose mere presence could subdue entire armies. I almost did not look. My attention was fixed on my records, cataloging the previous execution, a six-limbed predator from the Virex cluster that had lasted precisely 43 seconds against its assigned opponent. Efficient, predictable, unremarkable. "Next subject," the arena master's voice echoed, resonating through both air and mind. Only then did I glance downward, and I felt confusion. The creature was small. Not small in the sense of insignificance, but small in structure, compact, balanced on two limbs, its posture upright yet strangely relaxed. Its surface was smooth, devoid of scales or plating. No visible weapons, no evolutionary adaptations for combat. It looked unfinished. The scanners projected its classification across the central holo-display. Species, human. Origin, Sol 3. Threat assessment, negligible. A murmur of amusement rippled through the audience. Negligible? One noble hissed beside me, mandibles clicking in faint amusement. Why waste the arena's time? I had no answer. Even among primitive species, there was usually something. Claws, venom, psychic resonance, brute force. This human possessed none of it. It was as if evolution itself had overlooked them. And yet, my gaze lingered, because the human was not behaving as expected. It did not struggle against its restraints, did not collapse under the weight of inevitability, did not emit distress signals or attempt communication. Most species, when faced with the arena, reacted with one of three responses: defiance, desperation, or despair. This one displayed none. It simply stood there, still, observing. The guards disengaged the restraints, and the human's limbs lowered freely. For a brief moment it rolled its shoulders, an almost casual motion, as though preparing for something routine rather than fatal. The arena master spoke again, his voice amplified across the Colosseum and transmitted to billions across the Empire. Subject 7841, convicted of insubordination and aggression against a superior species. Sentence, trial by arena. A pause. For the entertainment of the Imperium and the affirmation of natural order. The crowd responded with approval, a unified pulse of anticipation. I should have returned to my records. Instead, I continued watching, because something subtle, something deeply unsettling refused to release my attention. The human lifted its head and looked upward, not randomly, not in panic, directly towards us, towards the observers, the judges, the witnesses. For a fraction of a moment, I felt as though its gaze had found me specifically, as though through a vast distance, through layers of energy shielding and atmospheric distortion, it had chosen a single point to focus on. Impossible. And yet, I shifted in my seat. "Release the Challenger," the arena master commanded. The opposite gate groaned open. What emerged was not a creature. It was a weapon given flesh. The predator's body was a fusion of engineered perfection, layered musculature coiled beneath armored plating, multiple limbs ending in serrated blades capable of slicing through reinforced alloys. Its sensory organs glowed with artificial augmentation, tracking movement, heat, electromagnetic fluctuation. I recognized the design immediately. A genus-class execution beast. Record: 73 victories, 0 defeats. Even elite soldiers avoided direct confrontation with such constructs. Against an unarmed primitive, the outcome was not merely certain, it was instantaneous. The crowd leaned forward in anticipation. This, at least, would be entertaining. I forced myself to analyze the human one final time. No hidden weapons, no external enhancements, no protective field. Its physiology suggested moderate endurance at best, minimal resistance to extreme trauma. It would die quickly. It should die quickly. The predator lowered itself, muscles tensing as it prepared to strike, its targeting systems locked on the human's center mass. There would be no warning, no hesitation, only impact. And yet, the human did not move, did not retreat, did not even adopt a defensive posture. It simply stood there, watching. The signal was given. The beast lunged. A blur of motion, a force capable of shattering bone, tearing flesh, ending existence in less than a heartbeat. I had seen this moment countless times, the instant before death, the inevitable conclusion. But this time, something was wrong, because as the predator closed the distance, the human smiled, not in fear, not in madness, but in recognition. And in that impossible fraction of time, just before claw met flesh, the human moved, and everything we believed about weakness began to unravel. The beast should have ended him in the first heartbeat. That is how these things always begin and end. I have recorded executions where the condemned never even perceived the strike that killed them. The arena is efficient. It does not allow for miracles. And yet, this time, the miracle came. The predator crossed the distance between them in less than a blink, its limbs a blur, its claws carving through the air with mathematical perfection. It struck where the human had stood. Because the human was no longer there. A collective disturbance rippled through the crowd, not quite silence, not yet disbelief, but something unstable in between. I felt it in the neural lattice of shared perception, a flicker of uncertainty spreading like a fault line. The human had moved. Not far, not dramatically, just enough. A fractional shift of position, a minimal expenditure of energy, but perfectly timed, so precise that the beast's strike meant nothing but empty air. Impossible. I leaned forward, my recording tendrils tightening as I recalibrated the feed. Perhaps a delay in perception, a distortion in the visual relay? No, the data confirmed it. The human had evaded. The predator adjusted instantly, pivoting mid-motion with terrifying fluidity. Its secondary limbs snapped forward, cutting off all escape vectors. It did not rely on instinct alone. Its design incorporated predictive algorithms, combat simulations refined over thousands of encounters. It should have adapted faster than any organic mind. And yet, the human moved again. Not faster. Better. He stepped inside the arc of the strike, his body rotating just beyond the reach of the serrated limbs. The movement was inefficient by conventional combat standards. Too close, too risky. Unless it was intentional.
A murmur spread through the audience. What is it doing? Is this chance? No, no, it cannot be. The predator lunged again, increasing speed, increasing aggression. Its attacks became a storm, relentless, overlapping, impossible to fully track. And still, the human endured. He did not attempt to overpower the beast, did not challenge it directly. He yielded space when necessary, closed distance when advantageous, always positioning himself just outside the line of death. I began to understand. Not fully, but enough to feel something unfamiliar coil within my thoughts. This was not evasion. This was observation. The first strike had not been avoided by instinct. It had been read. The realization unsettled me, because it implied something far worse than physical capability. It implied cognition under pressure, analysis in the face of extinction, the ability to learn in real time against a superior opponent. The predator's claws grazed him then. A shallow strike, but enough. The human's flesh split, crimson liquid spilling onto the pale sand below. The contrast was striking, vivid, almost symbolic. Blood. Warm. Alive. The crowd reacted immediately, some with renewed excitement, others with relief. Yes, this was correct, this was expected, the illusion would end now. The human had been touched, and in the arena, a single wound is often the beginning of the end. But the human did not fall, he did not recoil, he did not even cry out. He stepped back just once, creating distance as the predator circled, recalibrating its assault. And then, the human smiled. I felt a disturbance ripple through my core processes. It was not a smile of defiance, not the reckless grin of a creature facing inevitable death. It was recognition. Understanding, as though the wound had confirmed something. No, I whispered, though no one could hear me. The predator lunged again, faster, more aggressive, its systems adjusting for previous failures. This time it feinted, redirecting its primary strike mid-motion while its secondary limbs closed in from opposing angles. A perfect kill pattern. Unavoidable. The human moved, but not away. Forward. He stepped into the attack. Gasps erupted across the arena as the predator's claws sliced through his side, deeper this time, tearing flesh, drawing more blood. The impact should have crippled him, disrupted his balance, ended any possibility of resistance. And yet, he used it. The force of the strike rotated his body, carrying him along the trajectory of the attack rather than against it. His hand, fragile, unarmed, insignificant, lashed out, not at the predator's weapons, but at its structure. A single point, a precise location, the base of its forward limb. I magnified the feed, isolating the contact point. There, a seam, barely visible beneath the armored plating, a junction where organic tissue met synthetic reinforcement. A weakness. The human struck it, not with overwhelming force, but with exact timing, exploiting the momentum of the predator's own movement. The limb faltered, just for a fraction of a second. But in the arena, a fraction is everything. The predator recoiled, recalibrating, its systems momentarily disrupted. The crowd fell into an uneasy silence now, the earlier excitement replaced with something colder. Uncertainty. How did it... That was not random. It targeted a structural weakness. The human staggered back, blood continuing to flow from his wounds. By all observable metrics, he was losing. His body was damaged. His movements should have slowed. But they did not. If anything, they became sharper, more refined, each step more efficient than the last, each breath measured, each motion deliberate. I accessed the recorded data of the previous exchanges, overlaying trajectories, calculating probabilities. And I saw it. A pattern. The human was not merely reacting to the predator. He was mapping it. Every attack, every adjustment, every microsecond of delay. He was building a model, an internal representation of the creature's behavior, learning, adapting, predicting. The predator charged again, this time abandoning precision for overwhelming force. Its limbs struck in rapid succession, attempting to crush the human through the sheer volume of attacks. The human retreated, Barely. A step here, a shift there, always just enough. Until he didn't. For the first time, he stopped retreating. He planted his feet. The predator lunged, committing fully to the strike. And the human moved before it did. Not in response, in anticipation. He slipped past the initial strike, pivoted beneath the second, and drove his body forward with everything he had left. His wounded form collided with the predator at close range, too close for its primary weapons to be effective. His hands struck again, the same point, the same weakness. Once, twice, 3 times. The seam ruptured. A burst of internal fluid sprayed outward as the predator's limb collapsed entirely, its structure failing under the targeted assault. The beast let out a sound, not quite a roar, not quite a system error, but something between organic pain and mechanical failure. It staggered. For the first time in 73 recorded executions, it faltered. The human did not hesitate. He pressed the advantage immediately, moving with a speed that defied his injuries. He circled the predator, forcing it to turn, to compensate, to expose more of its compromised structure. Another strike, another weakness exploited. The predator's movements grew erratic as its precision degraded as damage accumulated. And then, it fell. The impact echoed across the arena like a final verdict. Silence followed. Not the usual silence of completion, not the satisfied quiet of an audience that has witnessed expected violence. This was different. Heavy. Uncertain. I looked around the Colosseum, at the nobles, the soldiers, the observers who had come to witness another predictable execution. No one moved. No one spoke. Because what we had just witnessed was not survival. The human stood amidst the wreckage, his body marked with wounds that should have ended him, his breath steady despite the blood that stained the arena floor. He looked at the fallen predator. Then, slowly, he looked up, towards us. And in that moment, I understood something that unsettled me far more than the battle itself. The human had not won by chance. He had not survived by instinct. He had studied. He had learned. He had decided. And the most terrifying realization of all? This was only his first match, and the human was only beginning.
News does not travel slowly within an empire built on conquest. It spreads like fire through dry atmosphere, fast, consuming, impossible to contain. By the next cycle, every major system had seen the recording. By the third, every strategist, every war scholar, every commander of note had formed an opinion. By the fifth, they began to worry. I was among those summoned, not as a spectator this time, but as an analyst. The Chamber of War Archives was silent when I arrived, its vast data streams already alive with replays of the arena encounter. The human's first match looped endlessly across multiple projections, each instance dissected frame by frame, probability threads branching into countless interpretations. "Explain it," one of the high observers demanded. Not a request, a command. I focused my sensory array, isolating the moment of first contact, the evasion that should not have been possible. "It is not random," I said slowly. "That much is obvious. We require cause." So did I. I expanded the sequence, overlaying predictive models used by the predator itself. The execution beast had calculated optimal trajectories, adjusting in real time based on expected prey behavior. And yet, it failed, I continued, because its predictions assumed panic. A pause. I felt their attention sharpen. The human did not behave as prey. The chamber dimmed as the projection shifted, new sequences replacing the old. Subsequent matches. Because there had been more. The arena had wasted no time. They sent another opponent within the same cycle, a towering, brute species from the outer war zones. Massive, dense with muscle fiber, capable of crushing armored vehicles with raw force alone. A spectacle of dominance. The human should have been annihilated. Instead, I played the recording. The brute charged, its approach direct, overwhelming, unstoppable. The human stood his ground.
Again, a pattern already forming. "He does not retreat unless necessary," I murmured. "He controls distance rather than surrendering it." The brute struck. The human absorbed the impact, partially, redirected the force, fell, but not fully. He allowed himself to be driven back just enough to draw the opponent into overextension. Then he struck. Not at the obvious targets, not at the hardened muscle or reinforced bone, but at the joints, the weak points. Always the weak points. The brute fell within minutes, not through superior strength, through collapse. The chamber remained silent. I advanced the sequence again. An agile hunter species, multi-limbed, designed for speed and unpredictability. Its movements defied linear tracking, its attack patterns intentionally erratic. Against such an opponent, prediction should have been impossible. And yet, the human adapted. At first he struggled. The hunter's speed exceeded his capacity to respond directly. He was struck multiple times, each hit precise, damaging, progressively weakening his physical state. By all metrics, he was losing. And then, he changed. I slowed the recording, frame by frame. The human's movements shifted from reaction to rhythm. His steps aligned, not with the hunter's position, but with its timing. He stopped chasing motion and began anticipating intervals. "He is not tracking the body," I whispered. "He is tracking the pattern." The hunter leapt. The human moved before it landed. A counterstrike, perfectly timed. The hunter faltered. And in that moment, it was over. I ended the playback. The silence in the chamber had deepened into something heavier. Not confusion, recognition. "He learns," one of the observers said quietly. "No," I replied. I brought up a composite overlay, multiple matches aligned, their timelines synchronized, movements intersected, decisions repeated, patterns emerged. "He does not merely learn." I highlighted specific sequences, moments where the human took damage he could have avoided, instances where his positioning left him vulnerable, intentionally. "He tests." A ripple of unease spread through the chamber. "He allows engagement under controlled risk. He gathers data through direct interaction. He refines his model of the opponent in real time." "That is adaptation," another voice insisted, though it lacked certainty now. I focused the display further. No, I isolated a sequence from the first match, the initial wound, then another from the brute encounter, then the hunter. All different opponents, all different scenarios, and yet the same decision, the same calculated acceptance of damage. "He is not reacting to the present," I said. "He is shaping the future." Understanding dawned slowly, painfully. He allows himself to appear vulnerable because it encourages specific behaviors in his opponent: overconfidence, aggression, predictable escalation. I turned toward the observers. "He is not fighting to survive each moment." A pause. "He is fighting to win the entire sequence." No one spoke, because there was only one conclusion left. He is not fighting to survive each moment. No one spoke, because there was only one conclusion left. This is not instinct. This is not improvisation. The words felt heavy, ancient. This is war. Not the kind we practiced across the empire, efficient, overwhelming, decisive. This was something else, something older, refined through repetition, through failure, through survival under conditions far harsher than our controlled arenas. I accessed deeper archives, fragmented data recovered from early observations of the human homeworld. Their history, conflict upon conflict, war upon war, not as spectacle, but as necessity, as inevitability. They had fought not because they were the strongest, because they had no choice. And they had endured. I returned my focus to the present, to the human, standing once again in the arena, awaiting his next opponent. He was injured, fatigued, outmatched on every measurable scale. And yet the probability models no longer favored his opponents. They could not, because the variables had changed.
The human was no longer an unknown. He was something far worse, a constant. "He is predicting them," someone of the observers said, the realization finally surfacing. "Yes," I replied, "but more than that." I hesitated, because the truth felt dangerous. "He is predicting us." The chamber fell into absolute silence. Not the silence of contemplation, the silence of fear. Because if the human understood the logic of the arena, the patterns of escalation, the selection of opponents, the intent behind each encounter, then he was not simply adapting to his enemies, he was adapting to the system itself. The next match began. A new opponent entered the arena, another species, another challenge, another test designed to break him. The human stepped forward, calm, focused, unwavering. And for the first time since I had begun my work as a historian of war, I felt something I had never recorded before. Not curiosity, not fascination, but dread. Because the arena had not created a warrior, it had revealed one. And the more we tested him, the more we understood a truth we were never meant to see. Humans did not survive because they were the strongest. They survived because they refused to stop fighting. No matter the cost, no matter the odds, no matter the enemy. And as I watched the human face yet another impossible battle, I realized something that chilled every layer of my consciousness. We were not studying him anymore. We were feeding him. And whatever this process was creating, it was not something the Empire could control. It was something far worse. Something inevitable. Something that had been forged long before it ever stepped into our arena. And now, it was awake.
Empires do not fear easily. We are not built for it. Fear is for the conquered, for those who look upward at overwhelming force and realize too late that resistance is meaningless. We are the architects of that realization, the enforcers of inevitability. And yet, the High Council intervened. The order came without ceremony, transmitted across secured channels, overriding all local authority. The arena, once a place of ritualized execution, was reclassified, not as a court, not as a spectacle, but as a laboratory. The human was no longer a prisoner. He was an anomaly, and anomalies are never ignored. I was reassigned, elevated beyond my role as historian, integrated into the Council's observational network. My purpose was no longer to record outcomes, it was to understand them. Escalate conditions, the directive stated, not a suggestion, an inevitability. The next match did not resemble the ones before. The arena floor shifted before the human even entered, its surface fracturing into uneven terrain, jagged ridges, unstable ground, sections that collapsed under weight. Atmospheric density increased. Gravity fluctuated in irregular pulses, distorting movement, disrupting balance. No species had ever survived such conditions. The gates opened. The human stepped in. He noticed everything. I saw it immediately, the subtle adjustments in posture, the way his gaze tracked the terrain, the air, the shifting gravitational distortions. He was not reacting, he was assessing. "Release the subject," the arena master announced, though his voice lacked its former confidence. The opponent emerged, a hybrid construct engineered for adaptability. It was not bound to a single form or strategy. Its limbs reconfigured mid-motion, shifting between speed, strength, and defense as needed. A perfect counter to unpredictability. Or so we believed. The battle began. The human stumbled almost immediately as gravity surged unexpectedly. The terrain beneath him fractured, sending him to one knee. The construct advanced, its form shifting into a configuration optimized for rapid termination. It struck. The human barely avoided the killing blow, rolling across unstable ground, his movement disrupted, inefficient. For the first time since his arrival, he looked overwhelmed. A ripple of relief passed through the observation chamber. "Yes," one of the council members murmured, "now we see the limit." But I did not share their certainty, because even as he fell, he was watching. The construct attacked again, adapting to his movements, exploiting the terrain, using the environment as an extension of its own design. And the human began to adapt with it. Slowly at first, a delayed step corrected, a misjudged leap recalibrated. His body struggled against the shifting conditions, his injuries accumulating faster than before. He was not in control, not yet. The construct struck him again, this time with enough force to fracture bone. I saw the displacement in his limb, the unnatural angle as he hit the ground. Any other species would have stopped, would have hesitated, would have broken. The human did not. He pushed himself up, unsteady, damaged, breathing heavier now. The strain was visible, the cost undeniable. And still, he continued. "He cannot sustain this," another council voice insisted. "The variables exceed his adaptive threshold." I remained silent, because I had seen this pattern before. The early phase, the part where he appeared to fail, the part where the illusion of limitation gave others comfort. The human moved again, slower now, more deliberate. He avoided direct confrontation, allowing the construct to dominate the center of the arena. Yielding space, yielding control, but not surrendering, never surrendering. The construct advanced, pressing its advantage, its form shifting into heavier configurations designed to crush resistance through sheer force. And then, the terrain shifted again, a collapse beneath the construct's weight, a momentary imbalance. The human moved. Not with speed, with timing. He used the instability, something he had struggled against moments before, as a weapon. He guided the construct's momentum into the collapsing ground, forcing it into a position where its adaptability became a liability. Too many variables, too many adjustments. A delay, a fraction. Enough. He struck. Not the strongest point, not the most obvious, but the most compromised. The construct faltered. The battle shifted, and from that moment on, the outcome was inevitable. Not immediate, not clean, but inevitable. When it ended, the human remained standing, barely. His body was damaged beyond what most species could endure. His movement slowed, his breathing uneven. Victory had cost him severely. And yet, he endured. Always.
There are many ways to end a life. The arena had perfected them all. But ending a life was never the true objective. Breaking it, that was the purpose. Until the human, we believed these two outcomes were the same. We were wrong. The directive came from the High Council without hesitation. Discontinue conventional trials. A pause in the transmission. Begin degradation protocols. I understood immediately. Combat had failed, so they would turn to something older, crueler, more effective against every known species. Suffering. The human was removed from the arena, not as a victor, not as a subject of admiration, but as a problem to be solved. They placed him in isolation first, a void chamber, featureless, silent, stripped of all sensory input beyond the bare minimum required to sustain biological function. No sound, no variation in light, no passage of time that could be measured or understood. I monitored the feed. At first, there was nothing. The human sat, motionless, waiting. Most species begin to deteriorate within the first cycle. Their minds, deprived of stimulus, turn inward, and what they find there is rarely stable. Panic follows, then confusion, then collapse. The human did none of these things. He breathed, slow, measured. His heart rate stabilized rather than accelerated.
He closed his eyes and remained that way for an extended duration. "Is he shutting down?" one observer asked. "No," I replied. "He is conserving." Time passed, or what passed for time within the chamber. Eventually, the human moved again, not erratically, not desperately, deliberately. He began to pace, mapping the boundaries of his confinement through touch, through memory, through repetition. He established patterns where none existed, created structure in an environment designed to erase it. He adapted. Of course he did. So they escalated. Nutritional deprivation followed, controlled, measured, enough to weaken but not to kill. We had seen this countless times. Hunger erodes will faster than pain. It reduces complex thought, replaces it with instinct, with desperation. The human's body responded as expected. Mass decreased, movement slowed, energy conservation became evident. But his mind remained. He adjusted his pacing, reduced unnecessary motion, entered prolonged states of stillness, his physiology adapting to scarcity with an efficiency that defied expectation. "How was he maintaining cognitive stability?" another observer demanded. I searched for an answer, found none. So they escalated again. Psychological stressors, simulated environments designed not to kill, but to break. They introduced illusions, fragments of his origin world, distorted, corrupted, auditory constructs layered with dissonance, repetition, emotional triggers extracted from incomplete cultural data, voices, faces, loss. We watched as the human was forced to confront them, again and again. Most species collapse under such conditions. The mind cannot distinguish between reality and fabrication when the stimuli are precise enough. They lose coherence, they beg, they surrender. The human reacted. For the first time we saw it clearly. Anger, not wild, not uncontrolled, focused. He moved through the illusions, not away from them, but through them. He touched them, tested them, verified their lack of substance. "They are constructs," I whispered. "He knows." But knowing did not make them ineffective. They pressed harder, more personal, more precise. We saw changes then. Subtle at first. His breathing patterns shifted. His posture altered. Moments of stillness became longer, heavier. He was under strain, real strain. And the council watched closely. "Continue," they ordered. Because this was what they had been waiting for, the fracture point. Every mind has one. Every species breaks eventually. The human would be no different. He couldn't be. The simulations intensified, pain layered with memory, isolation layered with loss, time itself distorted, cycles compressed, extended, made meaningless. And then, it happened. The human fell. Not physically, but internally. We saw it in the data, a disruption in cognitive rhythm, a breakdown in pattern consistency. He stopped moving, stopped responding, stopped resisting. Silence filled the observation chamber. "Record the state," one of the council members said. "This is it. The breaking point. The moment where even this anomaly would finally succumb." I watched. Something felt wrong, because the human stillness, it was too complete, too controlled. Time passed. No movement, no response, nothing. And then he inhaled, deep, slow, deliberate. His eyes opened, and everything changed. The data surged, cognitive patterns stabilizing, then restructuring, not returning to previous baselines, exceeding them. "He is recalibrating," I said, disbelief threading through my voice. "No," another observer whispered. "He is rebuilding." The human rose, not with desperation, not with relief, but with something else entirely. Focus. A clarity we had not seen before. The simulations continued, unchanged, relentless, and the human walked through them, unaffected, not because they had lost power, but because he had changed his relationship to them. They no longer control his responses, I realized. He controls them. The fracture had come, and instead of breaking him, it had refined him, strengthened him, transformed him into something harder, something the protocols had not accounted for. The council issued the final escalation: return him to the arena. If the mind could not be broken in isolation, it would be broken in conflict. The gates opened once more. The humans stepped into the arena, and for the first time, the crowd did not cheer. They watched, silently, because the being that stood before them was not the same one they had entered before. He was thinner, marked by suffering, but his presence, it had changed, condensed, sharpened, like a weapon honed beyond its original design. The arena master hesitated before speaking, a rare occurrence. Subject 7841, you stand before the Imperium once more. Your sentence, stop. The word cut through the arena, not shouted, not amplified, and yet it carried, across the chamber, through the systems, into every listening mind. The human had spoken. A silence followed, deeper than any before, because this was not part of the design. Prisoners did not interrupt. They did not address the arena. They did not speak. The human looked upward, toward us, toward all of us. And when he spoke again, his voice was translated instantly, rendered into every known language, every known form of comprehension. You think this is survival? No one moved. No one responded. Even the council remained silent. A pause. And then, this is mercy. The words settled like weight. Heavy, unavoidable. I felt it then, not confusion, not curiosity, but something far more dangerous. Understanding. Because in that moment, everything aligned. The controlled strikes, the calculated wounds, the restraint, the adaptation. He had not been fighting to survive. He had been holding back, testing, measuring, limiting himself within parameters we could understand. And now, those parameters were gone. The realization spread through the arena like a shockwave, because if this, all of this, had been mercy, then what would happen when it ended? The gates behind him began to open. The next opponent prepared. Another escalation, another attempt to assert control. But as the human stood there, calm, focused, unyielding, I understood something with absolute clarity. We had not brought him to his breaking point. We had revealed what lay beyond it. And whatever emerged from that place was not something the Empire was prepared to face. The opponent entered the arena. The human did not look at it. Not yet. He continued to stare upward. At us. At all of us. At the ones who believed we held power. And for the first time since this began, I felt something I could not deny. Not doubt, not uncertainty, but fear. Because the human had finally spoken. And what he said was not a plea, not a declaration, but a warning. And we had just begun to understand it. Too late.
Empires do not admit failure. They erase it. The Council's decision came without debate, without dissent, without delay. If the subject cannot be broken, it will be terminated. No more experiments, no more observation, only conclusion. I felt the shift immediately, not in words, but in intent. The atmosphere of analysis that had surrounded the human dissolved, replaced by something colder, final. They would not study him anymore. They would end him. Deploy the Apex construct, the command followed. Silence filled the chamber. Because there are weapons, and then there are legends. The Apex was not designed for arenas. It was not designed for spectacle. It was designed for war. Entire battlefields had been reduced to silence beneath its existence. Species had surrendered at the mere confirmation of its deployment. It was not simply engineered, it was assembled from the most lethal traits the galaxy had ever produced.
Speed beyond natural limits, strength beyond mechanical tolerance, adaptation beyond predictive modeling. It was the answer to everything. And it had never failed. Until now, it had never been necessary. The arena began to change. Not incrementally, not subtly, completely. The floor collapsed inward, reconfiguring into a fractured landscape of ruined structures and jagged terrain. Defensive barriers rose and fell unpredictably. Environmental hazards activated across multiple layers, thermal surges, electromagnetic interference, gravity distortions. This was no longer a controlled environment. It was a war zone. "This is excessive," one observer murmured. "No," another replied. "This is necessary." The gates opened. The human entered. He walked slower this time, not from hesitation, from exhaustion. The damage from previous trials remained, untreated, unresolved. His body bore the marks of everything we had done to him: fractures, lacerations, strain beyond sustainable limits. By all logic, he should not have been standing. And yet he was. He stopped at the center of the shifting battlefield, his gaze scanning the environment, not with surprise, not with confusion, but with calculation. Always calculation. "Release the apex," the command echoed. And something ancient answered. The far gate did not open, it shattered. The apex did not emerge, it arrived. Its form defied cohesion, a fusion of organic and synthetic, its structure constantly shifting, reconfiguring even as it moved. Limbs extended and retracted, adapting in real time. Its surface rippled with layered defenses, each responding to environmental input, each optimized for survival and dominance. Its presence alone altered the field. The air itself seemed to resist it. I felt it even from within the observation chamber, a pressure, a distortion, as though reality was adjusting to accommodate its existence. "This is not a match," I whispered. "This is extinction." The apex moved, faster than any prior opponent, faster than the eye could track. It crossed the battlefield in an instant, its primary strike aimed directly at the human center mass. There was no evasion, no time, no possibility. Impact. The human was thrown, his body lifted from the ground, carried by the force of the strike, crashing into the fractured terrain with enough energy to shatter reinforced structures. The crowd reacted, not with shock, but with release. Yes, this was correct. This was inevitable. The illusion was over. The human did not move. Seconds passed. "Confirm termination," a council voice ordered. I focused the feed. Biometric readings fluctuated, unstable, inconsistent. But not absent. No confirmation. A pause. And then, the human moved. A single motion. A hand against the ground. Then another. He pushed himself upward, slowly, painfully, every movement a visible strain against the damage inflicted. He stood. Again. The silence returned, deeper this time, because even the apex paused, just for a fraction. Not confusion, not hesitation, but recalibration. The human was still alive, and so the apex adjusted. Its form shifted, adapting to new parameters. It did not repeat its previous attack. It evolved. The second strike came differently, multi-layered, unavoidable, designed to eliminate all potential responses simultaneously. The human moved. Too slow. The apex struck. Again and again. Each impact drove him further into the terrain, each strike calculated to overwhelm, to destroy, to erase. He could not match it. Not in speed, not in strength, not in endurance. By every measurable standard, he was losing. And yet, He continued. Not blindly, not desperately, deliberately. I began to see it. Not immediately, but gradually. The human was not attempting to counter the apex directly. He was shaping the battlefield. Each movement, each forced displacement guided the apex's trajectory. He yielded ground, but only specific ground. He absorbed damage, but only when it placed him where he needed to be. What is he doing? One observer demanded. I did not answer, because I was beginning to understand. The environment. The shifting terrain, the unstable structures. The human was mapping it, not as an obstacle, as a weapon. The apex lunged again, driving him towards a fractured section of the arena, unstable, collapsing under pressure. The human did not avoid it. He ran towards it. Impossible, someone whispered. The ground gave way beneath them both. The apex adapted instantly, restructuring its limbs to maintain balance to compensate for the collapse. But in doing so, it committed. For the first time, its adaptivity became a constraint. Too many adjustments, too many variables, a delay, a fraction, enough. The human moved, not away, through. He used the collapsing terrain to redirect the apex's momentum, forcing its mass into a confined space where its full range of motion became a liability. Close, too close. The apex struck, but its movements were restricted now, its power constrained by the environment it had not accounted for. The human struck, not with force, with precision. The same as always. A point, a seam, a weakness. The apex adapted. Of course it did. Its structure shifted, sealing vulnerabilities, redistributing load, compensating for damage. But the human did not stop. He struck again and again, each attack not intended to destroy, but to force adaptation, to overload the system, to create instability. He is not targeting a weakness, I realized. He's creating one. The apex's movements became erratic, not from damage, but from conflict within its own adaptive processes. Too many variables, too many simultaneous corrections. Its perfection became its flaw. The human pressed forward, wounded, exhausted, barely maintaining function. And yet, unstoppable. Not because he could not be stopped, but because he refused to stop. The final moment came without announcement, without warning. The apex shifted. One last adaptation, one final attempt to recalibrate. And in that instant, it hesitated. A fraction, a conflict. Enough. The human moved. Faster than he had any right to, stronger than his body should have allowed, driven not by survival, but by decision. He struck. Everything aligned. Timing, position, momentum. The apex's structure collapsed. Not explosively, not dramatically, but completely. Its systems failed in sequence, cascading through its own adaptive network until nothing remained functional. The construct fell. The impact echoed across the battlefield. And then, silence. Absolute, unbroken. The human stood, alone, barely. His body trembled under the weight of what it had endured. His breathing was uneven, his form damaged beyond recovery by most known standards. And yet, he stood. No one cheered. No one moved. Because what we had witnessed was not victory. It was transformation. The arena, the empire, the certainty we had built our existence upon. It had been challenged, and it had failed. I looked around the chamber, at the council, at the observers, at the warriors who had once believed themselves invincible.
Empires demand answers when certainty collapses, and ours had shattered. The command reached me in silence, encoded within priority channels reserved for existential anomalies. Determine origin, determine nature, Determine threat. 3 directives, all impossible. And yet, I began. The human remained under observation, his existence now contained within layers of restriction far beyond anything previously imposed. But the arena was no longer the focus. He was no longer the question. His species was. I descended into the deepest layers of the Imperial archives, sealed records, fragmented probes, incomplete surveys of unremarkable systems long dismissed as irrelevant. Sol 3. Designation, peripheral. Classification, non-priority. A mistake. The first data was unimpressive. A mid-sized terrestrial world, atmosphere unstable by optimal standards, temperature fluctuations beyond comfort thresholds, tectonic instability, violent weather systems. Hostile, but not uniquely so. There are many such worlds. Most do not produce anything noteworthy. I continued. Biological scans. Diversity, extreme. Competition, constant. Predation cycles, unbalanced. Survival conditions, inconsistent. Still, nothing extraordinary. And yet, the human had stood in the arena. I searched deeper. Historical records, fragmented transmissions, recovered signals, observational logs from early probes that had long since been abandoned. And there, I began to see it. Conflict. Not isolated, not occasional. Constant. Their history was not marked by periods of peace interrupted by war. It was the opposite. War was the baseline, peace the anomaly. I studied their early civilizations, primitive by our standards, their technology crude, their understanding of the universe incomplete. And yet they fought. Over territory, over resources, over ideology, over nothing. They fought each other. Relentlessly, cycle after cycle, generation after generation, entire populations rising and falling within the span of what we would consider a minor epoch. Extinction events, natural and self-inflicted, should have ended them. They did not. They adapted, rebuilt, evolved, not physically, but cognitively, socially, strategically. They should not have survived this, I whispered, reviewing a sequence of global conflict that had reshaped their entire planetary structure. And yet, they did, I answered myself, because survival was not optional, it was constant. I moved forward through their timeline. Technological advancement accelerated, not in stability, but in response to threat. Each innovation born not just from curiosity alone, but from necessity. Tools became weapons, weapons became systems, systems became doctrines, and doctrines became identity. But even that was not the most disturbing discovery. Now, that came later. I accessed their communication networks, early digital transmissions preserved within the archive, billions of voices, chaotic, contradictory, unified only by their existence. And within that chaos, patterns. They fought each other, constantly, and yet they cooperated, formed alliances, built structures not just for dominance, but for survival as a collective. Even at their most divided, they remained connected. It made no sense. Why? I asked aloud. No one answered. So I searched further, deeper, into their psychology, their behavioral structures, their motivations. And there, I found it. Not in their wars, not in their victories, but in their losses. Moments where logic dictated collapse, where extinction was inevitable, where survival probability approached zero. And yet, they resisted. Not for territory, not for dominance, but for each other. Individuals sacrificing themselves for others, groups forming under impossible conditions, strangers protecting strangers, enemies becoming allies when faced with a greater threat. It was irrational, inefficient, illogical, and yet it worked. Again, and again, and again. They do not fight to win, I realized.
They fight so that others can continue. The human in the arena, his behavior aligned perfectly, the calculated risk, the acceptance of damage, the refusal to stop. It was not about individual survival. It was about something larger, something embedded so deeply within their species that it transcended logic. I returned to the present, to the human, to the being who had faced everything we had deployed and endured. He was not exceptional, not by human standards. That was the truth I could no longer deny. He was typical, a product of his world, his history, his species. And that realization, it was more terrifying than anything I had witnessed in the arena. Because if one human could do this, then what would many do? I compiled my findings, prepared the report, presented it before the council. They listened, silently, as I spoke of hostile environments, of constant conflict, of survival through adaptation rather than dominance. But when I reached the final conclusion, I hesitated, because the truth was not strategic, it was existential. "What is humanity?" one of them asked. The question echoed through the chamber, not as curiosity, as necessity. I answered, "Not a warrior species." A pause. "Not by design." Confusion rippled. "Then what?" another demanded. I processed the data one final time. Every battle, every loss, every impossible survival. And I spoke. "They are a survivor species." Silence followed. But I was not finished. "They do not endure because they are the strongest." I looked at them all of them, the architects of an empire built on strength. "They endure because they do not stop." The weight of the words settled, heavy, unavoidable. And more importantly, I paused, because this was the part they would not understand, the part that made everything else inevitable. They do not fight alone. No response, no comprehension. So I clarified. They fight for each other. The chamber remained silent, but I could feel it, the shift, the beginning of understanding. Because everything we had built, our doctrines, our hierarchies, our systems of dominance, they were designed around the individual, power, control, superiority. Humans were something else. And that difference, it changed everything. I concluded the report with a single projection, a probability model, not of one human, but of many. The outcome was clear, not immediate, not guaranteed, but inevitable. The council did not respond immediately. They did not need to, because the answer to their original question had already been given. What was humanity? Not a threat, not yet, but something far more dangerous, something that could become one. And as I left the chamber, my thoughts returning to the arena, to the human who had begun all of this, I realized something that no data could fully quantify. We had not discovered humanity. Humanity had revealed itself to us, and we were not ready, not even close.
Empires are built on decisions. Not the small ones, the routine calculations of expansion and control, but the rare moments where certainty fractures and the future depends on a single choice. This was one of those moments. The council convened in full, not through projection, not through proxy, physically. Every high authority present within the central chamber, their forms arranged in deliberate symmetry, their presence radiating power accumulated over cycles of unchallenged dominance. And at the center of it all, they placed the human. Not in restraints, not in chains, but standing, unbound. I felt the significance of that immediately. This was no longer containment. This was confrontation. He looked different outside the arena. Smaller somehow. Without the shifting battlefield, without the constant threat of immediate death, his physical form appeared
diminished. And yet, the pressure he exerted on the room remained, invisible, unquantifiable, but undeniable. His body bore the evidence of everything we had done to him. Scars layered over scars, structural damage imperfectly healed, a physiology pushed beyond sustainable limits and somehow still functioning. He should have been broken. He was not. The council observed him in silence, not with curiosity, not with arrogance, but with caution. A silence stretched, long enough to become uncomfortable, long enough to test boundaries. The human did not speak, did not move, did not react. He simply stood, waiting. As though this gathering of the most powerful beings in the galaxy was not something to fear, but something to be measured. Finally, one of the high counselors broke the silence. "You have been evaluated." The words carried weight, authority embedded in every syllable. "You have been tested." A pause. "You have survived." The human's expression did not change. No pride, no relief, nothing. "You represent a species unknown to us, a variable outside established parameters." Their voices overlapped slightly, different tones, different structures, unified in intent. "You are a potential threat, or a potential asset, or both." The human listened, that was all. Listened, as though the classification of his existence, threat, asset, anomaly, held no significance to him. "We face a decision," one of the counselors stated. A shift in the chamber, subtle, but real. "To destroy you is to eliminate uncertainty." A pause. "But to do so may invite consequences." They had read the report. They understood, at least partially, what humanity represented. "And to release you," another voice added, "is to accept risk." Another pause. "Unquantifiable risk." The human remained still, unmoved, unchanged, and in that stillness I began to understand something I had missed before. He was not waiting for permission. He was waiting for clarity. The council conferred, silent exchanges of data, probability models flashing across the chamber, outcomes calculated and recalculated in real time. Destroy, release, contain, exploit. Every option examined, every outcome uncertain. For the first time in recorded history, the council did not know what to do. And that was the true fracture. Because power is not defined by strength, it is defined by certainty. And certainty was gone. Finally, they turned back to him. The decision, whatever it would be, had not yet been made. So they chose something else. A question. Simple. Direct. "What are you?" The words echoed through the chamber, not as a challenge, not as an accusation, but as a need. Because everything we had seen, everything we had recorded, analyzed, failed to understand, it all led to this. Define yourself. Explain the anomaly. Give us something we can control. The human looked at them, at all of them, not with defiance, not with submission, but with something far more unsettling: clarity. And when he spoke, there was no hesitation, no calculation, no performance. Human. That was all. No elaboration, no justification, no attempt to shape the answer into something more acceptable, more understandable. Just truth. Raw, unfiltered, uncompromising. The chamber fell silent, because the answer, it changed nothing, and everything. He did not identify as a warrior, did not claim superiority, did not threaten retaliation or promise alliance. He simply stated what he was. And in doing so, he removed every assumption we had built around him. "You offer no designation of rank," one of the counselors observed, "no claim of authority, no indication of intent." The human did not respond, because he had already answered, and we were the ones failing to understand. "What is your purpose?" another demanded. Stillness. Then, to go home. The simplicity of it struck harder than any declaration of war. No conquest, no revenge, no demand, just return. The council processed this, analyzed it, tested it against every model they possessed, and found nothing. Because there was nothing to analyze. It was not strategy, it was not deception, it was truth. And that truth, it shifted something fundamental within the chamber. Because everything we had done, the arena, the trials, the suffering, had been built on the assumption that he was something we could define, control, use, destroy. But standing there, unbroken, unafraid, unchanged, he was none of those things. He was something else, something beyond our systems, beyond our expectations, beyond our control. The council hesitated, just for a moment, but it was enough for the balance to shift. Because in that hesitation, power moved, not visibly, not dramatically, but undeniably. The human had not demanded anything, had not forced anything, had not even resisted, and yet the outcome was no longer ours to decide alone. Because we understood now, too late, that this was not about a single being. It never had been. The arena had not revealed his weakness. It had revealed ours, our dependence on control, on predictability, on systems that could be understood and manipulated. The human did not fit within those systems, and that made him dangerous. Not because of what he could do, but because of what he represented. The council reached their conclusion. Not spoken, not formalized, but inevitable. And as the human stood there, waiting, not for judgment, but for action, I felt the weight of what was to come. This was not an end, not a resolution, but a beginning. Because whatever choice the empire made, it would not contain what had already begun. The human entered our arena, survived our trials, endured our attempts to break him, and now he stood before us, not as a prisoner, not as a subject, but as something far more dangerous, a representative of a species we did not understand, of a future we could not control. And as the chamber prepared to act, I realized something that no analysis could deny. We were no longer deciding his fate. We were deciding ours.
Empires do not announce their fear. They encode it, bury it beneath language that appears measured, controlled, deliberate. They call it diplomacy, strategy, recalibration. But I have studied empires long enough to recognize the truth beneath the words. And this was fear. The decision was made without spectacle. No public declaration, no ceremonial conclusion. The human was released, not as a prisoner, not as a victor, but as something far more precise, a message. I watched as they escorted him from the central chamber, not in chains, not under force, but with distance. Even the guards maintained space, their movements careful, calculated, as though proximity itself carried risk. He did not resist, did not speak, he simply walked. The same way he had entered the arena, the same way he had faced every impossible trial. Forward. A transport was prepared, unmarked, untraceable, routed through channels reserved for sensitive operations. His destination was not announced. It did not need to be. Sol 3. Home. And for the first time since his arrival, the human left our control. The moment passed quietly, almost insignificantly, but its consequences echoed. Because information cannot be contained once it has been witnessed, and this
This had been witnessed. At first, it spread as rumor, fragments of recorded combat leaking through unauthorized channels, distorted accounts of an unknown species that had survived the arena, a being that had defeated constructs designed for war. Dismissed, questioned, debated, until the full recordings emerged, unaltered, unfiltered, undeniable. I observed the reactions across multiple systems, military networks, academic institutions, strategic command centers. The pattern was consistent: disbelief, followed by analysis, followed by silence. Because the data did not align with established doctrine, it contradicted everything we understood about strength, about hierarchy, about survival. He should not have won, the statement repeated across countless channels. He could not have endured. And yet, he had. The whispers changed, not in volume, in tone. What is humanity? A question that once held no relevance now became central to every major strategic discussion. Probes were redirected, archives reopened, long-ignored sectors reevaluated. Empires that had once expanded without hesitation began to pause, to reconsider. Not out of weakness, but out of uncertainty. Because uncertainty is the beginning of caution. Alliances shifted, subtly, quietly. Species that had once aligned under our banner began to reassess their positions. Not openly, not yet, but the calculations had changed. Risk was no longer abstract. It had a form, a name: human. I continued my work, but it was no longer the same. I was no longer recording conquests. There were none, not in the way I understood them. Expansion slowed, conflicts de-escalated before reaching critical thresholds. Engagements once considered inevitable were avoided, because the question lingered in every decision: what if they were watching? What if they were next? I reviewed the final recording one last time. The human standing in the arena, wounded, outmatched, unbroken. I had analyzed it countless times, every movement, every decision, every impossible moment reduced to data. And yet, there was something data could not capture, something beyond calculation: choice. He had chosen to endure, chosen to adapt, chosen to fight not because he could win, but because stopping was not an option. And that was what changed everything. Because it was not unique to him, that was the truth I could not escape. He was not an anomaly. He was an example, a single instance of a broader pattern, a pattern that extended beyond the individual to the species itself. I accessed the probability models again, not of one human, but of many. The outcome had not changed, it had only become clearer. Not immediate dominance, not sudden conquest, something slower, more inevitable. Adaptation, integration, expansion not through force alone, but through presence, through persistence, through the same relentless progression that had allowed them to survive their own world. Humanity had entered the galaxy not as conquerors, not as subjects, but as something far more dangerous: participants. And we would never be the same. Because the arena had shown us a truth we could not forget. Not all power comes from strength. Some of it comes from the refusal to stop. And that kind of power cannot be contained, cannot be predicted, cannot be defeated. Only faced. The question is no longer whether we will face it. The question is when.